you dig into it, it gets wilder. They had so many different rituals, and they would actually, like, for example, when two people get married, the husband and wife, they would stare at each other and they would exchange cacao beans through the ceremony. They actually would do cacao bathwater baptisms for the newborn baby. And they had all kinds of initiations and rites of passage involving this. And now what's happened from all the way then, where it was a sacred substance, and it went through this whole almost like tragic metamorphosis into where we've been the last 20 years, when chocolate was like a thing of, it was toxic. It was totally poison, right? I mean, when I was growing up, when I was a kid, chocolate was just like a guilty pleasure, right? This chocolate bar that we had, this waxy paste bar, was just, it was like poison. And so that is like, now the second part of Faust is what I found interesting. If anyone's familiar with this, the first part is when he trades over his soul. But the second part is the redemption. Is what does Faust have to endure to come back to grace? And that's the side of chocolate. That's the side of cacao that we're seeing now. There's a massive chocolate revolution in the entire industry where the raw chocolate movement is coming forth. And just so you know, one of the prime areas that I've been focusing on now is not just the nutrition side, which I could go into in depth on any question you had on the nutritional components, and I will get to those questions, by the way, any of that. But one of the things is on the back end. What is it taking to produce this inferior product? The slave labor treatment. This is part of the tainted nature of what I'm talking about with how it's traded soul to the devil, where chocolate was literally spread over the world. Fame and fortune was spread all over the world, but it paid a price. And now to produce that in the Ivory Coast of West Africa, or South Africa, I should say, is one of the biggest populations of cacao production for some of the biggest companies that we know of for chocolate. And they're using, a lot of it is slave labor, child slave labor. Some of us may be aware of this, some of us not. So this brings into question not just the quality of the food we're putting into our body, but what kind of industries that we're actually supporting. Right? And what is actually taking place to produce a simple chocolate bar, right? Or a Hershey's Kiss, which I like to call the kiss of death. Right? Why? Because the Hershey's Kiss, it embodies this whole theme, or this whole idea where it's a delicacy. It's a comfort food, but wrapped within that comfort food is essentially poison in the form of refined sugar, in the form of insecticides, genetically modified organisms, milk powder from glow-in-the-dark, pasteurized, homogenized milk. That is, so we look and we correlate all this to the massive diabetes epidemic, to the obesity epidemics, to the cancer epidemics, how we even got to this place, because we weren't paying attention. But now the pendulum's been swung so far to one side where now we're forced to pay attention. That's why we're all here at the Live Food Ministry, right? Now to look at the other side, how do we get back into balance? So for me, a part of my mission, not just as a nutrition consultant and educator and speaker, but also to be a force of good for this new emerging raw chocolate revolution where chocolate industries are being forced to change. There was a documentary called The Darker Side of Chocolate. Did anyone see that? That was about the slave labor going on in Africa. And they had underground cameras, and they went in, they interviewed everybody that was involved, and they got it all on tape, what was really going on. And this brought to light this massive epidemic, and it's causing companies to have to change. Because people want to feel good. At the end of the day, it's like we want to feel good that we did something good for ourselves, we did something good for our family, and we did something good for the planet. Right? You guys feel that same way? Yeah. So that's one of my big missions. And then we get into the cacao bean, or how incredibly nutritious chocolate really is, and how it's used most accurately as a delivery system, once again, as I said, for herbal medicine. right? Chocolate is a celebratory food. And in this community, it's like we want to celebrate all the time, right? But if you're celebrating every 5 minutes, then it's like, okay, we might need to talk. We might need to sit down for a minute. But if you use it appropriately, it could be the greatest tool for transforming not just your health, not just your physical vehicle or template, this body, but also for the way you start to perceive things. Because you start to realize in our culture, we have turned every single thing that was once a sacred tool or substance, and we flipped it into a poison. Coffee, sugar, alcohol, tobacco, chocolate. Soda even. Soda used to be a tonic when it originally came out. But then we went through this whole rigmarole and turned it into a poison. And that may be the greatest message I can deliver to you guys in terms of chocolate, is that we just need to adjust our view on how we look at things, right? Just change it a little bit instead of like this extremist behavior that we have where it's like it's all good or it's all bad. And that happens a lot in the health food culture, I've noticed. Extremism. Instead of that, it's like, well, wait a minute. Let me just adjust my dial a little bit. Let me look at how indigenous tribes use things. Like the ancient Mayas, who constructed some of the greatest architecture that's still left over to this planet that our archaeologists and our engineers can't explain to this day. And don't even ask me how I think that even happened. Because the phrase, "you are what you eat," is literal. Very literal. And it's my sneaking suspicion, call me crazy, it doesn't matter what you think about it, but it's my sneaking suspicion that one food helped influence a flux of higher intellectual potentialities that transmitted messages from, you know, wherever, whatever it is, that gave them insights on how to build architecture, how to do the things that now we look back on and we're like, wow, like how did that happen?